May it be your will, God, my God, and the God of my ancestors, that you guide my eyes with the light of your Torah and save me from stumbling and making mistakes. For God gives wisdom, and from God's mouth comes knowledge and understanding. Amen.
Amen. So, as I was saying, last time we approached Parashat Vaishlach, it was on the Pshat level. What we interpreted was basically Yaakov Avinu returns back his blessing, which he had deceitfully taken from Iskak, a blessing which should have been going to Esav. And in Parashat Vaishlach, the whole episode where he is appeasing his brother Esav, he goes out of his way to Seir, sends messengers to Seir, sends gifts to Seir, right? And what we said was this was a whole tikkun that Yaakov Avinu went out of his way to rectify the mistake that he had committed. Right? If you all will remember that whole parasha, it is online. You all please go recheck the whole parasha during the week. But today, what we will want to do is let us go into the summary first, and then we will look at some midrashim, which are totally, I mean, in a different direction. We will look at midrashim about Esav and about that episode, and try to figure out what and where the Hachamim are directing this to. Okay. Would somebody like to read the summary? Volunteer to read it?
I'll read it.
Thank you.
Jacob prepared to meet Esau. He sends him gifts to appease him with messengers who inform him that he is coming to meet him with 400 men. Jacob was very much afraid of his brother, so he divided his camp, saying, "If Esau strikes down one camp, the other will escape and prays for help." That night he wrestles with an angel in the guise of a man who changes Jacob's name to Israel. Jacob and Esau meet tearfully and part peacefully, each going his separate way. Jacob next journeyed to Succoth, and where he built a house and built booths for his cattle. He then bought some land near the city of Shechem from the children of Hamor, where he pitched his tent and built an altar. Dinah is raped by Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, who was chief of the country. Jacob's sons Shimon and Levi deceitfully take revenge by asking the males of the town to circumcise, and on the third day murdering all the males of Shechem, and Jacob's other sons join them in plundering the city. Jacob is asked by God to go to Bethel and receives another prophecy at Bethel, where he is blessed with the same blessings that were given to Abraham. On the way to Ephrath, Rachel dies giving birth to Benjamin and is buried near Ephrath, which is present-day Bethlehem. Isaac dies and is buried in Hebron. Jacob's and Esau's progeny are listed.
Okay, so that is basically all the 7 aliyot. Now we are going to focus on this particular episode in the parasha. Looking up, Jacob saw Esau coming, accompanied by 400 men. He divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maids, putting the maids and their children first, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. He himself went on ahead and bowed low to the ground 7 times until he was near his brother. Esau ran to greet him. He embraced him, and falling on his neck, he kissed him, and they wept. Looking about, he saw the woman and the children who he asked, are these with you? He answered, the children with whom God has favored your servant. Then the maids with their children came forward and bowed low. Next, Leah with her children came forward and bowed low. And last, Joseph and Rachel came forward and bowed low. And he asked, what do you mean by all this company which I have met? He answered, to gain my Lord's favor. He's asking about the gifts he has sent earlier, right? Which we have not read now, but he has been sending him gifts, about 20 different herds of different kinds of animals, domesticated animals. Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Let what you have remain yours. Jacob said, no, I pray you, if you would do me this favor and accept from me this gift, and really the word is beracha, this beracha that is coming to you, that is how it is in Hebrew, asher hubat lecha. For to see your face is like seeing the face of God, and you have received me favorably. Please accept my present, which has been brought to you, for God has favored me, and I have plenty. And when he urged him, he accepted. So, no, sorry, the second line is where asher hubat lecha. That is where, please accept my present, which has been brought to you. So please accept my beracha, which is coming to you. That is what the Hebrew exactly says. For God has favored me and I have plenty. And when he urged him, he accepted. And Esau said, let us start on our journey and I will proceed at your pace. But he said to him, my Lord knows that the children are frail and the flocks and herds which are nursing are care to me. If they are driven hard a single day, all the flocks will die. Let my Lord for me and at the pace of the children until I come to my Lord in Seir. The Lord said, then Esau said, let me assign to you some of my men, some of the men who are with me. But he said, oh no, my Lord is too kind to me. So Esau started back that day on his way to Seir. But Jacob journeyed to Sukkot and built a house for himself and made stalls for his cattle. And that is why the place is called Sukkot. So this is where we want to focus. Even before we begin, anything in this episode strikes you that you need to question it? Anything that is questionable? Straightforward episode sounds like.
I think one of the questions is how come Esau is so very, gracious to Israel? Because technically he should be very angry, and but he is not.
He should have been very angry. We expect him to. He has vowed that he is going to kill his brother. So obviously that is what is expected by Yaakov also. So he prepares for war. And suddenly we see a turnaround with Esau. Esau's character over there is very different. Very nice. Correct. So that strikes us as, where is this coming from? Sort of, right?
But that is why though he sends gifts. And only when he sees that he is receptive and calmed down, only then he travels through his route. Israel,
Okay.
right?
Probably he sends him gifts. What do you
Yeah.
mean by that is why? To appease him, he sends him gifts. That's what you're saying?
Yes, appeased.
But
He
then what
appeased
is
him
the
because
guarantee? But the question is, what is the guarantee that sending gifts will appease him? How come sending gifts appease him? Because you
have the signs, if he accepts. Initially, it has been said that he has already sent him previously before he travels.
Correct,
So,
but he had not accepted it till the last. Till in the end, he asks, "What is all this gift business?" He says, "No, you take this beracha." He says, "I have enough of my own. I don't need it." So he says, "No, you take it because it is a blessing coming to you." And he insisted, and only then only after insisting he takes it. So he was not interested. So he is not appeased because he took the gifts, obviously from what the Pshat is saying, from what the Torah is saying. He didn't really want to take it also, but Yaakov Avinu insisted, right? And even with the gifts, I mean, Esau's character, the way it is painted, he's a brute of a man. So if he wants to kill his brother, suddenly, why would gifts matter? Why would that change his opinion? No?
Years have passed. After all, they are brothers. They are not
Good.
hard and fast enemies.
Fantastic. So they are not hard and fast. So in that moment of anger, he said whatever he said, but he really is not that kind of a person. Very nice.
It shows the large-heartedness of Esau and forgiving nature also.
Good. So you see from here, Esau is depicted as a very forgiving kind of a very large-hearted person,
Yes.
right?
He's telling Esau that I see the face of God in you.
Correct. What does he mean by saying that I see the face of God in you? Very nice question. Right? And why would he see the face of God in?
Hello.
Yeah, Abraham. Say.
Shalom alaikum.
Alaikum shalom.
मी काय विचारतो, the question, because when Esau promised that I'm going to kill my brother, when he had the plan, it was after his father dies, after the mourning of the father. But now he is still alive.
Right.
So
very nice. So Iskak Avinu is still alive, and the decision by Esau to finish Yaakov was only after he passes away. So the time has not yet arrived for him. So maybe later on he may even think about finishing off Yaakov. Good, very nice point.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yeah, nice.
Not for them.
One thing that bothers me is when he says, let me go, you go ahead, I don't need company, I will travel slowly and everything. And then he says, let my Lord go ahead of his servant while I travel slowly at the pace of the cattle before me and at the pace of the children until I come to the Lord in Seir. Seir is where Esau has his camp, right? Then what does it say? So Esau went back to Seir, but Yaakov journeyed to Sukkot. He never had any plans to go to Seir. But he tells him, okay, you go ahead, I will meet you in Seir. But he never goes to Seir. He comes to Sukkot. He comes into the land of Israel. So there also Yaakov is like sort of, not being very straight with him. That is something that, apart from what you all pointed out, so this is our text that the Midrashim are working with, and they are picking up on all these questions that we have asked, and let's see how the Midrashim respond to that questions. Okay, kissed him in the Hebrew. That has excited attention, but also the unusual display of affection, so uncharacteristic of Esau. So this is Nechama Leibovitz. I'm picking this page from her book where she brings the Midrash. But now I'll just take you back to what she is pointing to. So we'll come down to the second last verse in Hebrew. Esau ran to greet him. He embraced him and falling on his neck, he kissed him and they wept. Right? You have that? Now, Vayaroth Esau. Go three verses. Let me give you a pointer here. Vayaroth. You see the pointer there? Yeah. Vayaroth Esau Likrato. 3 verses from below. Vayichabbechehu Vayipol al Tzavara Vayishakehu Vayibchehu. Vayishakehu has all these dots on top. You see that? Vaishakehu has all these dots on top. The Midrash is working with this. First of all, the Midrash is talking about the vowels below the letters. So each letter, Vav has a kama, pata, Yud has a thirik, Shin has a kamas, Kuf has a sere, He has a vav shuruk. Okay. So each letter is accompanied by a vowel. So it is saying they are using some thinking where they believe that, let us come back to the Midrash. Whenever you find that the letters outnumber the vowel points, you expound the letters. So if the letters were more and vowels were less, then letters are what has to be expounded on. When the points outnumber the letters, you expound on the points. Points is the vowel points. But here, the letters do not outnumber the points, nor the points outnumber the letters. It is balanced out. Both vowels and letters are same numbers. This teaches that Esau's compassion was aroused at that moment and he kissed him with all his heart. So emotions are sort of, the vowels are representing the emotions. And if the emotions balance out the action, then the emotion and the vowel balance out means it was genuine. Okay, that is how they are learning just from one word, the Vaishakyahu, that way, and he kissed. And then it goes, said Rabbi Yanai to him. Why then is the word pointed above? Like we saw all the dots on top of the word. Why is that? Torah goes out of its way to dot that letter. Then why is the word pointed above? But we must understand that he came not to kiss him, Nashko, but to bite him, Nashko, Nashaho. Whereupon the patriarch Jacob's neck turned to marble, setting that wicked man's teeth on edge. What then is the implication of the phrase, and they wept? This one wept on his neck, and the other one on account of his teeth, because it's painted. So here you have a conflict. Here you have two opinions. One opinion is giving credit to Esau that he came with emotion, and it was a genuine response where he forgave his brother. He came when he saw his brother after 21 years. He came and kissed him and hugged him, and everything was genuine because the words balance out. So hold on. The other opinion is saying, but there are some points over there. What are the points saying? The point is saying, no, he initiated the whole episode with guile. He wanted to finish him off. He wanted to kill him, but Hashem did a miracle, and his neck turned to marble, stone, and he couldn't do whatever he was planning to do. And that's why when they cried, one cries out of pain, the other cries really out of genuine brotherhood. Okay, so this is the first take, Bereshit Rabbah, very old midrash, which tells you that we really don't know. I mean, that's what the rabbis are saying. We really don't know what is happening over here. But understanding Esau and understanding his nature and what he represents, it couldn't be that he forgave Yaakov. It was only HaKadosh Baruch Hu's interference that stopped him from killing him. Okay, everyone with me? Okay, so this is the first midrash.
Yes.
This is Hebrew. Let's just jump over it. This is another midrash in Tanhuma Vaishla. Esau sought to bite him, but his neck turned to marble. Again, the same idea. This is the reason for the points, indicating that his kiss was not a sincere one. See, so we already know these points have a tradition. So there is a tradition in Tanhuma. There are so many points. Why are the points given? We know these points are there. We have an oral tradition. For the points is the reason for the points indicating that his kiss was not a sincere one. But why did they both weep? To what may this be compared to? A wolf which came to snatch a ram, whereupon the ram began butting it with his horns. The wolf's teeth became entangled in them. Both of them wept. The wolf on account of its impotence, and the ram for fear its enemy might try again to kill him. So here it is not even genuine. Right. Yaakov Avinu is also crying out of fear here, that he may try again. So here too, when Esau and Yaakov, Esau wept because Jacob's neck had turned to marble, and Yaakov, for fear of Esau, might return to bite him. Regarding Jacob, we have the text. Thy neck is as a tower of marble. That is in the Song of Songs. Regarding Esau, thou hast broken the teeth of the wicked. So they have proof text also from different Psalms to prove the point. Okay? Okay. One more on the same lines. And Jacob sent messengers. Okay, let's first talk about this is on again a different midrash, different idea, but you wanted to say something, Judah.
There is a Kabbalistical understanding also about why there are points. Okay, so Kabbalistically, words like the alphabet represent your body. So alphabet is like body, and the vowels are like your soul. Okay, so when a body and soul comes together, then there is motion. So when you give a vowel to a alphabet, you can pronounce it. You can give it a, like, life is given to it. But above that, then this the words which we pronounce is like the life force of the word, because like when different vowels come together with different alphabets, you have a word. The word is like the life. But there is also a chantillation mark, a tune. So this tune, the tune, whichever tune, the Torah has different words. There is a tune. ना काय असं काय?
Cantillation mark.
तो त्याच्यामध्ये ती अशी खालीवाली आहे.
Okay.
काय ती कुठली आहे?
Tevi. Dargah. Tevi.
So that thing is showing you the emotions. Okay, then why we have points above the letters? So according to Zohar and according to Kabbalistical understanding, it says that this word, even if you understand this word, this verse on all the 4 levels, like physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual, there is still some mystery there. And this mystery is in the points, because above this 4 level, there is a level which is very close to God, and it is known as the level of Nekudim, level of points. So something which is happening there, it can't be understood by us, because something which happened there is something which is to be happen only when the Mashiach comes. And what is going to happen when the Mashiach comes? Like what is going to happen in the end of time? That evil will understand why it was created in the first place, and it will give itself over to the goodness, the righteousness. And when evil and righteousness both will come together, they will weep together, because they will understand that both were created for the ultimate good. So this is the thing which the points, this is Kabbalistical idea, what the points tell you. But we are not, like, Kabbalistically this is going to happen in the end of the time. Okay, but what is that story telling us now? The story is telling us what you understand from the story at the because anytime you read Torah and there is a story, no, the first question you have to ask is, what is the story telling me? The story tells you something about yourself. For some people, the story tells that evil cannot be changed. If a person is evil, he will be evil. For other people, it says that evil can change. Evil can become compassionate, and he will change. He will. So to some other people, compassionate person, anyhow, म्हणजे गरम दुधाने भाजलेला फुकून पितं लस्सी पण. तर lot of different things you can, it comes out from this story. But तुम्हाला काय त्याच्यामधून येते, तुम्हाला काय समजते त्या स्टोरी मधून? हे जर तुम्ही घेतलं ना, तर तुम्हाला काय समजतं? तुम्हाला तुमची स्वतःची पर्सनॅलिटी समजतं. आपल्याला समजतं की माझ्यामधला एसाव कसा आहे आणि माझ्यामधला याकोब कसा आहे. कारण एसाव आणि याकोब यांना दोघं जुळीचा भाव आहेत. आपल्यामध्ये पण तेच असतात, एसाव आणि याकोब. तर आपला एसाव आणि आपला याकोब त्यांचा काय चाललंय ते समजण्यासाठी या स्टोरी मधून, आपण जे आतापर्यंत घेतलं ना, त्या स्टोरी मधून तुम्हाला समजतं की वेगवेगळ्या इव्हलचा पण सांगते आणि चांगल्या गोष्टीबद्दल पण तो वेगवेगळे गोष्टी सांगते आपल्याला तो ते. ओके, आपण पुढचा घेऊ त्याच्यामध्ये आपल्याला अजून लेवल समजेल.
This adds to our basic understanding with a Kabbalistic, view on things. The next one is taking time. Yeah, there it is. Now, this is about what happens a little earlier. I have not brought this, but as we spoke about it, Jacob sends messengers to Esau, and we said that maybe he was appeasing him with gifts or whatever it was. He sends them gifts. So here, there is Bereshit Rabbah, again, another midrash, and Jacob sends messengers. Rabbi Huna applied the verse, he that passeth by and meddleth with strife not his own, is like one that taketh a dog by the ears. Said the Holy One, blessed be he. He was going in his own way, and you dispatched a delegation to him, saying, thus said thy servant Jacob. So here, this is a critique of Yaakov Avinu. Why you were going back to your father's house in Israel? God had already planned so that Esau will go and stay in Seir. He is not even in the neighborhood. Yeah, he is somewhere else. Why send your messengers out of your way to Esau? Why bring him in the picture? It is as if there are two people fighting, having a strife, and you are meddling in between. You will also end up getting punches, taking a dog by his ears, right? So this is a critique of Yaakov Avinu. Some of the rabbis, Rabbi Huna, feels that Yaakov Avinu had no business sending anybody out to Esau. You look into your matter, you came back, you go to your parents, you settle down in the land of Israel. And if Esau comes your way, you go and talk with him. If he didn't come out of to you, if he has nothing to do with you, why go out of your way to send messengers? You see? So, then there is another critique over here. The moment that Jacob called Esau, my Lord, Adoni, the Lord, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, thou hast humbled thyself and called Esau my Lord 8 times. By thy life, I shall raise up from his children 8 kings that reigned in the land of Edom before there reigned any king over the land of children of Israel. So, end of the parasha, there is a list of Alufe Edom, and there are 8 of them that reigned even before it says goes out of the way to point out, even before there was a king in Israel, there were 8 kings in Edom. So the Midrash makes a connect. 8, this is 8 times he bowed down. You know why? You bowed down 8 times, now this is what you get. Your actions are affecting this. And that's why there were 8 kings already in Edom before Israel even had the first king, King Shaul. Okay, another of such conversations on our parasha. Thus shall you speak unto my Lord Esau. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said to Rabbi Ephes, write an epistle from me to His Majesty the Emperor Antoninus. So this is Rome. We're talking about Rome, and they wanted to send a message. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi wants to send a message to the king, Emperor Antoninus. He arose and wrote from Yehuda, the prince, to His Majesty, the Emperor Antoninus. Rabbi Yehuda took the letter, read it, and tore it apart. Said he to him, write from thy servant Judah to His Majesty, the Emperor Antoninus. Said Rabbi Ephes to him, what for thou dost abase thyself? Rabbi Yehuda replied, what, am I better than my forefather? Did not Jacob say, thus said thy servant Jacob? So here you see, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi learns a different lesson from this particular episode. He said, oh, it is totally good and fine. If a king is a king, you give him the kavod, you give him the honor. You say you are servant. It is perfectly okay. It is fine. He bowed down 8 times. I am better than Yaakov Avinu. If Yaakov Avinu could decide to do it, certainly I can do it. Right? 2 totally contradicting opinions in the Midrash. It's just amazing how the rabbis, and all of them are brought to us. So go figure. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi advocates diplomatic discretion in addressing authority, preferring to forego elusive honors in order to achieve practical ends. The following Midrash defends Jacob's conduct even more forthrightly. Here, another one. Said Rabbi Yonatan, whoever wishes to placate a king or authority and is not familiar with their ways and tactics should place this chapter in front of him and learn from it the arts of appeasement and placation. Here, learn from here. What Yaakov did, he sends gifts, he sends messengers, he sends so many times, 8 times he sends a group whose 8 times repeat that same thing, your servant, my Lord, your servant, my Lord. 8 times. You know what advertising does today? Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola. All the time you hear that. Yeah, the drink of life or whatever that goes into your. You start believing it. Taste of thunder, right? All that is nonsense, but it has an effect. So he hears my Lord, my Lord, my. By the 8th time, he accepts the fact. Oh, Yaakov Avinu has really decided that he is my servant, right? So these are tactics you should learn from here. Yaakov Avinu could do it. He uses them. You should use that when you need to placate kings and authority. This is where you go and learn from Yaakov Avinu. And you see, even Avraham Avinu, whenever he is with the Hittites, he's bargaining for the land. You see, he bows down. He does everything. We have all these other midrashim. He says, no. We should not bow down to other people. We should not. We see in the Torah, it was an accepted practice. Okay. So, with all this, let us just take a look at what is happening in the midrash. Really, what is the midrash wanting to do? That is the main question. And here, with the kind of conflicting opinions, contradictory opinions, it becomes quite, quite problematic to really understand or grapple with the midrash. On one side, it is complimenting Yaakov Avinu for whatever he does. On the other side, it says, because what you did, you didn't have a king for 8 generations or whatever. Huh? So how do we understand the midrashim? That is our main idea in the parasha. Give yourself a minute and see if you can come with some reasonable ways of understanding this. Till then, I'll see if we have some other. Here, I was thinking this went a little below, but what Jeremiah spoke about. Rabbi Hama bar Hanina said, it was the prince or the tutelary angel. I don't know what that word means, but it means like it is the angel which is set for, in charge, the angel in charge of Esau. For he said to him, therefore I have seen thy face as, the second half of the midrash, as though I have seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me. So, Bereshit Rabbah takes that phrase, what Jeremiah pointed out, that I have seen your face, and it is like the face of God, and he says that this is proof that his angel had Esau's angel had the wrestling match, because in the wrestling match, the person who he wrestled with, or the angel who he wrestled with, had the same features as Esau. From there, they know that he was struggling with Esau's angel. Okay, this is Bereshit Rabbah. Another midrash on figuring out who the angel was. Okay, so let's take one, and then we'll go into the other and try to see if we can come up with some of our own interpretations of the wrestling match. Judah, would you like to add something?
No.
Okay, what I think, and a lot of thinking, is like this. When Esau is being painted by the Midrashim, right? The rabbis don't have that 2,000-year-old story in their head. What they have is Rome as it was persecuting them then. Once Esau is equated with Rome, right? That's what they equated Rome with, Esau. Esau's descendants, Edom, is Rome. I don't know how it works, but that's what our tradition says. From Seir, how did they end up in Rome is a question. that is an imaginary jump.
No, Herod.
From Herod.
Herod.
From King Herod.
Herod and
King Herod was an Edomite, Right, but he was again aligned with the
Rome.
Greeks or Rome.
Rome.
Rome was already there.
Yeah.
I think it was the Greeks, not the Seleucids and the.
No, Rome. Mark Antony.
Okay.
Cleopatra. Roman.
So they were already Roman by the time of King Herod. And Herod was an Edomite, or at least a descendant of the Edomites, who was also Jewish. Her mother was Jewish. And so somehow that's how they link Rome with Edom. And once you know that Edom is doing whatever it is doing, then it could never be that you can say that Esav changed his ways and Esav came back as a different person. He came back lovingly and with brotherly love. So although in the face of it, we see that there is certainly a reconcilement between the brothers, but because of the historic aspect that they were living in when these midrashim were being read or made, right? The effect of that historical or that reality was very much at play when they were making the midrashim. So that was one very important element when Bereshit Rabbah and all these midrashim were being written, right? That because the darshan, whoever was going around, had a reality where Torah was forbidden, Brit Milah was forbidden, studying Torah was forbidden, doing mitzvot was forbidden, and in that, we know Rabbi Akiva, 9 other sages were all butchered to death, right? That is how bad the persecution was when these midrashim were being created. So that is the practical aspect of or the real aspect of why Edom was never forgiven. Although in reality it is one, but they would read into it that he wanted to kill Israel, Yaakov, but Hakadosh Baruch Hu interfered and he was unable to do that. Okay. I think apart from that, there is this very strong element of what their actions stood for, even in I mean, we know that at this minute Esau did whatever he did, but later on when we came back from Egypt, right, who were the ones who opposed us and we had to go around? It was Edom. They did not allow us to walk through, enter. So it was always that Edom was problem. Amalek, again, Esau's great-grandson, comes out to destroy Israel. And Amalek is, very strong about, the Torah is very strong about finishing Amalek totally, annihilating him. So Edom in this episode even may have changed, but his evil spark remained. And if that remained, then what kind of tikkun or what kind of repair has been done by Esau? So that is the question they ask. If it was not repaired, then Esau is Esau. Although at this minute he was unable to overpower you. His brotherly love may have really, stopped him from killing him. But in the heart of his heart, he is evil, and that's one issue that we have been throughout history. We have to deal with, right? So that's why they come very strong against Esau. That is what I think. That is one way of understanding it. Otherwise, if we compare my last year's class with this class, you will see that according to the Torah, it is that Yaakov Avinu himself gave back his berakah to Esau, so that he felt that he was in the wrong, and he did whatever he did against his brother came back to him. All the punishments that we have to say they were punishments. Yaakov, as we said last time, ended up as a pauper. He had to serve for both of his brides. then there was all the time quarreling between his wives and his children after that. And even the episodes of let us say take a detour and talk about Dinah. Yeah? Why was Dinah raped? And what happened after Dinah's rape? So after what happens after Dinah's rape, if you go, I have not selected, I don't think I have selected that portion, not there. Anyway, but one of the aspects that you see that Hamor is Shechem's father, right? Shechem rapes Dinah, and his father comes to ask for his hand as a wife, her hand for his son. So the two brothers, her from the same mother, from the Leah, from Leah, they say you have to circumcise, and they have this whole discussion as if they are her father, You said our daughter. They are saying our sister. They should be saying our sister, but in a way they are taking over the discussion from Yaakov Avinu. And the question is, why do they do that? Why are they sort of, insisting that they will our sister be as an harlot? That is a question they ask their father, but it should be the father should have responded. Why was it that Yaakov? It says very clearly that the brothers were not there and Yaakov didn't do anything. So they are questioning Yaakov. You didn't do anything. He had some other reasons why he didn't do anything, because he didn't have all the brothers there, right? But they question him. Why didn't you do anything? You were the father. You should have acted immediately. But you, because she is the daughter of the not loved mother, you don't care. That is the hints that we see all the time. And maybe one of the reasons why Dinah, because a lot of Midrashim says that she went out and she was a very bold girl and she went out and she shouldn't have done that. But so it comes back to Yaakov Avinu's relationship with her. Yaakov Avinu, she was like a daughter of a not loved mother. So again, that episode happens because she sort of revolted against Yaakov's house or Yaakov's unloving nature towards her. And that's why she ended up wherever she ended up, in the Shechem's dungeons. So that is how the Hachamim read it in the Midrash, whether she was responsible for, although she shouldn't be responsible for what Hamor did, obviously not. But they make her responsible because she is sort of reacting to her father's unloved relationship with her. And so again, that thing keeps on happening, although he may be not responsible directly, but indirectly it is that act that Yaakov did comes back to him as punishment. So again, Dinah's rape comes back as a punishment. Then Joseph's sail to Egypt, or he thinks that he is dead, again comes back as a punishment. So Yaakov Avinu recognizes this, and he to some extent tries to change that, but it comes back to him, right? But why did we get into this discussion? I totally is the connecting point. 1 second. Right. So we were talking about Esav and Yaakov, and how the Hachamim paint the picture of Esav in very, very cruel and very, very unsavory colors, in as a very wicked person, because in their reality they feel that Esav never really repented in his heart. Okay.
Yeah, the story Midrash about no. There is a Midrash about Dinah, that because he hid her from Esau,
right?
So that's why this incident happened, because he was afraid that Esau will ask her in marriage, or maybe marriage for his children, and he didn't want it to have somebody from the Esau's line. So he hid her. So the Midrash says that this is because of that incident this happened.
So Yaakov was not forthcoming to to his brother, and he sort of closed his heart by thinking that his daughter it's not a good match for marrying his brother. So that's why he got punished because of a rape.
There's a midrash.
Again, a midrash, yeah. Let us now look at the second story, which I am not pulling out midrashim for this, but I want you all to think about how, because this is one of the most enigmatic stories interpreted, and that's why a lot of midrashim on this story. We just read one, the wrestling match of Yaakov Avinu, right? And so the gift went on ahead while he remained in camp that night. That same night he arose, and taking his 2 wives, his maidservant, and his 11 children, he crossed the ford of Yavok. After taking them across the stream, he sent across all his possessions. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he wrenched Jacob's hip at its socket, so that the socket of his hip was strained as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for dawn is breaking." But he answered, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Said the other, "What is your name?" He replied, "Yaakov." Said he, "Your name shall no longer be Yaakov, but Israel, for you have striven with beings divine and human, and have prevailed." Yaakov asked, "Pray tell me your name." But he said, "You must not ask my name." And he took leave of him there. So Yaakov named the place Peniel, meaning, "I have seen a divine being face to face, yet my life has been preserved." The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping on his hip. That is why the children of Israel to this day do not eat the thigh muscle that is on the socket of the hip, since Jacob's hip socket was wrenched at the thigh muscle. That's it, I think. Okay. So this is the wrestling match. Not much is told about it, right? But let us see what we already saw. One midrash which says that this was the angel of Esav, because when he sees Esav, he says it's like looking at the face of God. Looking at your face is like looking at the face of God. And that means that the angel's face resembled Esav's face. Apart from that, what could be happening there? Any ideas? I mean, we are just doing what you call brainstorming, creative interpretations of the whole thing, coming up with midrashim of our own. The way we have to work with midrashim is, what are the questions that we need to ask? What stands out? What is it that should elicit an explanation?
Okay, anywhere in the Torah is it mentioned that Yaakov goes and meets his parents?
No.
He doesn't. When he comes back, he doesn't meet his parents if they are alive.
No, he does. He does, but it doesn't mention in the Torah. It is taken as if it is but natural. Torah doesn't say. The Torah does mention that Yitzchak dies, and both Yaakov and Esav bury him. That the Torah does say, I think.
That is later on, no?
Yeah. What is very interesting is our parasha talks about the death of Rivka's maid servant, who was called Deborah, and she's buried under the whatever there is a tamarisk tree or something like that.
Yes.
Which is, we don't know who Deborah is. We don't know why. She is mentioned. I have another reason why I could say that she's another midrash that I made, but no, I didn't see it. Anybody mention it? But I think because Rivka made a mistake with initiating the whole incident with Yaakov, Rivka sort of the Torah decides not to mention, and to bring it to our notice that the Torah is not mentioning Rivka, the Torah mentions her maid servant's death, but her death is not mentioned. That's what I think. Just to give you a,
Yes. It should be because, and many times they used to, means the servants also used to die along with their masters in the olden days.
No, but it's not like this.
No, it's not. It's not talking about that. Anyway, we
Okay.
come back to our wrestling match. Any ideas? Okay, who would like to take it by the horns? Let's start asking some questions, right? Once we ask questions, then we will be able to fill in the blanks. What questions do you have?
I think the first question is, who is this angel and why is he really doing a wrestling match? Some kind of wrestling. So my perception is maybe the angel is Yaakov's own self, trying to, uh, like, uh, you know,
His
he's trying to
conscience.
decide, maybe he's trying to decide
His
whether I should
conscience.
go with the family or run away from there. Maybe, because he's very afraid of maybe meet the family later. But I think there's some conflict which angel itself is his second being in a way.
Right. So sometimes we have all these
But
conflicts of our own, and in
it
this
won't
case,
lead
that conflict
to
basically has
the
a
whole.
manifestation that other self in me stands out, and I'm fighting, or it is maybe just a dream that Yaakov Avinu is conscious that he has a conflict of interest.
But
Yeah,
still, if
somebody,
it is in the
Rivka,
conscience, it won't have effect on his body.
have you ever closed your eyes and spoken and imagined that you are just about to cut a lemon, and then you just imagine that the lemon, you have the juice, pressed into a or imli juice or lemon juice. How does it happen that we start salivating? It is just imaginary, no? But we have
But that
some.
is just senses. It's not. It doesn't
Does
happen
it happen
actually.
to you that does it happen to you that if you imagine lemon juice or imli juice, you will salivate?
That is what is senses. No, the
Oh, so
taste
what
buds,
the
that's
story
a
is
different thing.
probably saying is the story is probably saying that he was so very much into it. I mean, in a dream, you are doing what you think you are doing. you can end up, falling on the left side of the bed or whatever. Things happen. So similarly, there was a physical expression in Yaakov Avinu. But I'm not saying it was a dream. It was probably a prophetic incident. I'm just saying that it was on a level where his unconscious. This is what David is saying, not me, that his
And even
conscious was having a conflict of interest, and he was having a wrestling match about what he is going to pursue. And let us paint it a little further. What are the two things that he could be in conflict with? Come on.
Cheating his brother.
Is that a conflict? But why does he cheat his brother? If we go into that, then you will come to the conflict. Yeah.
Okay.
Why does he cheat his brother? What does he want?
He wants the blessings of the
He
firstborn.
wants the blessings of
Firstborn.
firstborn, which is what? Power.
Power, yeah.
Firstborn is power. Yeah, he has control over others. He has blessings over the clan, right? That is what the
Yes.
firstborn represents. So now he is either pursuing power or he is pursuing what? What could be the other aspect?
He must be thinking it that
Power
is
is
right.
materialistic, right? Power to some extent is materialistic. So he is Ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim. That is how he is represented by the Torah. He is a simpleton sitting in his tent. So he has a conflict of he wants to be like Esav or he wants to be like the way he was born. You know, we all look up to our older brothers, right? Want to be like them.
Siblings.
A lot of times it happens. This is very natural. So he has a brother who is totally very different from him, and he wants to either be like his brother who craves power, who craves the material enjoyment of this world, or he has his other inclination which takes him away into a spiritual dimension, into a world where he wants to not be very worldly, a world where he wants to be more giving and more what are the words when you want to be different from material, very very spiritual, let's call it, right? So there are these points of conflict that Yaakov has. Anybody wants to go into these points of conflict by the names the angel gives him? What are we see that there is a play in the names. What is Yaakov's name meant? The meaning of Yaakov's name. In fact, Esau says Yaakveni Pamaim. Yaakveni Pamaim. He says he cheated me twice. He was crooked with me twice because Yaakov is the heel. The heel is the crooked part of the body, right? It is crooked, right? The heel. So from there, his name comes Yaakov because he was holding to the heel of his brother. But Israel has the word Yashar in it. Israel has Yashar El, right? So he straightens himself up. And we see the crooked nature of Yaakov. What are the crooked things that he is doing? He cheats his father, his brother. When he comes back, even here, we see that he tells him, no, you go ahead. I am coming back to Seir. Don't worry, I will meet you at Seir. He doesn't go to Seir. There is something about Yaakov that is deceptive. Where does it come from? It comes from his mama, no? A lot of people are like their mama, right? Genetic influence. No? Laban is white on the front, but he is a cheat. You see, Yaakov's discussion with Laban in our parasha, or last week's parasha, end of yesterday's parasha, he tells him, why did you ransack my camp? Why did you check everything? Because you felt that I stole something from you. You are so many. And then he goes out and tells him, tens of times you changed my salary. You tried to cheat me. You tried to rip me off. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu helped me. And the angel was with me. And that's why I am what I am. And I come back with the property and the money that comes to me, which is rightfully mine. But you always thought that how could you, if you would have got your way, I would have been a pauper, still a slave at your in your house, right? So you see that Laban is a cheater. Laban cheats him with his daughters. Laban keeps on doing that, right? Even in the end, if Hashem did not interfere with Laban, he would have again come back and taken everything back. That was his plan, right? So Yaakov Avinu has these two very different drives inside of him, and Yaakov Avinu has to deal with that. So very nice, David. That is one way we can interpret the dream, that he is finally at peace with himself, although he has a limp in his leg, right? Leg again represents on what you stand, your physicality, your standing in this reality, in this world, right? So although there he has a limp, but in his spiritual life, he is complete. There he becomes a Yasharel. He has Yashar means straight, and he has wrestled with God and man alike. So what it means is he has wrestled with different levels of reality to become complete. Nice. Any other ideas?
Yeah, I was just thinking, yeah, I mean, if you're blaming Lavan also, even to a certain extent, the mother is also to be blamed because she chose Jacob over Esau. They were both her children, right?
Yes.
So
He's
she
also
We, in fact, a
also,
minute ago said that even the Torah sort of hints that it was not very acceptable of her action, and
yeah,
that's why her maidservant's death is mentioned, but her
ye-
death is not mentioned.
yes,
So you compare it with the death of Sarah, compare it with the death of Rachel, and her death is missing. Yeah.
yes.
Or maybe her grave might other people might desecrate because of the anger towards her. That is why it is not mentioned.
Who was angry with her?
So other people, maybe Esau's generation further, when they know what she has done,
No, I
that is
don't
why
think
the
so.
name is not mentioned.
I don't think that the Esau.
in fact all the graves and everything are kept by the other people only. We don't keep the graves. त्या लोकांनीच सांभाळलं आतापर्यंत सगळ्या दुसऱ्या
Right.
लोकांनी.
True. They have a fetish about worshipping graves, and we are forbidden to do that. But they have kept the traditions. Yeah. Anyway,
And about
so
this Jacob's fight of consciousness, but he goes to the other side, I think so, and that is why the angel has to fight with him. So why does Jacob go to the other side in the first place?
why does he go to the other side?
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't go to the other side. He is alone.
As if his vessel or something was remained over there, so he goes to bring it,
Oh, that
and
is
that is
another
why
midrash you're bringing. Okay, so that is a midrash which goes on by Kahem, Vayvartem et Hanahal, Vayaver et Asher Lo. After taking the Makron, he sent across all his possessions. Vayaver et Asher Lo. So Vayaver et Asher Lo, on that there is a midrash which mentions that whatever was, I don't know where the midrash detour point is, but on that he went back because something was missing one of his possessions, so he went back to get it. But that's again the midrash talking about Yaakov Avinu's secluded, because he was with his staff, his children, everything. Suddenly, how come he ended up alone? So that is where the midrash tells you that he bought everybody and then went back again to.
So he goes
get
in the
that
wrong
possession.
thing. That is why the angel fights with him.
He was in the what?
Wrong area means he goes in. I think so.
But
Esau's
no,
area.
in the end, he comes up with a blessing. No, so he was always, thank God that he was wherever he was. The wrong area. If you would say that, then this whole episode would not have happened to him. But this was supposed to happen to him.
Joshua, this is Jeremiah.
Hi, Jerry.
Yes, I have an insight.
Opinion. Yeah, go ahead.
In the beginning, when Yaakov Avinu and Esau is being described, one seems to be described like a physical person. Esau is a physical person, and Yaakov is a spiritual kind of person. Yoshev Ohalim.
Ishtam of Yoshev Ohalim. That is his description. Yes.
Yeah. So at this wrestling match, it is like a physical match where he is fighting the angel, and while fighting the angel, there is a time where he is almost successful in. He could have. It's like he can now just dislocate his head or something like this. In that situation, the angel says, I have to go. Okay, that means that Yaakov has proved himself now so much physically powerful. And then the moment the angel says, let me go, Yaakov leaves him. And this is not a physical attribute. It is more like a spiritual attribute. You are leaving your enemy right now. At that moment, Yaakov is now displaying characters of being a physical and also a spiritual, and that is what Yaakov has turned to become now. He has changed to become not only physical and not only spiritual, together
Right.
both.
Correct.
Right.
In today's terms, like Israel is also the army and also the yeshiva. That is together Israel. That is how I would like to look at this wrestling. And then he is called Israel.
Right.
You are no
Right.
longer Esav, you are no longer Jacob, you are Israel.
See,
Thank
this
you.
is how we began the talk. We said that when the Hakamim, the Darshanim over there were talking about Esav, they were talking about their reality, right? Similarly, you are interpreting your Midrash with your reality, the military of Israel and the yeshivot of Israel. So how much that is impactful, our reality into our interpretations that we can see. But you're right, that is Levado. So this particular episode in terms of the Berachot, right? Let us come back to the Berachot, and we will try to work it out from there. We have about 5 minutes more. So it is, we had spoken last time also, it has to do with face. Vaikra Yaakov Shem Makom Peniel, that is God's face, you see. And then Panim El Panim, Raiti Elohim Panim El Panim, I saw God face to face. But this, we didn't really see God, but divine being face to face, right? And when it began, there are other, let's see where else we have a face over here. But Ta'avor Mincha Al Panav. So he sends the gifts. Al Panav is in front of his face, sort of. The first line, your Hebrew, Al Panav, the face. And the name of the thing was Penuel, which is again a face. Penuel is from the word panim. So what that already gives you the hint of the Midrash, where it has to work out. So it is really talking about the face of Yaakov. What was the face of Yaakov? The face of Yaakov was the face of Esav, which was the physicality, what he was interested in, the power, or his spiritual aspect. And Jeremiah said, oh, really it is a combination of the two. He was able to bring the two together. In fact, my understanding is Yaakov's face was never known to him. Yaakov always felt that he wanted to be like Esav. So he did everything like Esav. He wanted to take the berachot of Esav. He was supposed to be a Ishtam Yoshev Halim, but he approached the world with a face that was not his. At this juncture in time, he was able to grapple with that aspect, and I think it is his conscience that, very rightly David says, he was able to grapple with what am I really? What is my real face? Is my real face Esav? Should I go after that? Or he has already, I mean, this is a fag end of the whole tahlik. How do you say in Hebrew? The whole
various steps towards
steps. Right. So this is the fag end of the steps. the initial step he takes is that he sends gifts out of his way. He is not supposed to go to his say he's going to his parents, but he decides, no, this is something that I have to correct. So he goes, and we will take it to his credit. That is the first step he takes. He sends it to Esav. What is he sending to Esav? A message along with gifts. So we say, Vaiten lecha Elohim mital hashamayim umishmane haaretz verov dagan vetirosh. So all the blessings of Vaiten lecha are, you see, in physicality. He represents that when he is sending back the 200 sheaves and whatever. So what is he sending? Milk cows and milk calves, or all that is investment. Like you send a male, that is okay, but when you send a female that is able to give birth, so one sheep, female sheep, means he will have so many other sheep in her lifetime, right? With a male sheep. So that is what he's giving. He's giving in today's times, we will call it an investment in shares. You're going to get dividends every so many years. So that is what he's giving. He's giving the beracha, what was supposed to be his, and he starts the tali he starts the whole steps by sending that message. But the more important is, he's sending a message which says, your servant, my master. And what is a gevir? That is Vaitan lecha Elohim mitah hashamayim umishmane haaretz verov dagan vetirosh ya'avdu ha'amim ve'ishtahavu lecha le'omim. Nations will bow down to you, will serve you, ve'ishtahavu lecha, and bow down to you, bnei emim, your mother's brothers, your children, your brothers, that is, will bow down to you. So he is bowing down to him 7 times, whatever the Midrash was talking about. That 8 times he bowed down, that 8 times was to represent that idea that he is giving back that blessing. So he is again going with his own face, that this is not me, this is not my beracha. My beracha is Vaiten lecha birchat Abraham. That is my beracha. This beracha belongs to Yaakov, to Esav. So the whole beginning happens when he gives the beracha, and that's why it says after the gifts go ahead, while he remained in his camp, now he is thinking about this. I have started this whole process. How will I take it to an end? My brother may come to make war to him. Will I be able to explain all this to him? And he does. He says very clearly, take the blessing that is coming to you, that is yours, right? Not only in that, in the fact that he is taking those blessings, but the blessing, the original blessing that he had stolen from his father, right? So that whole idea is in his head. On a very spiritual plane, this person is now looking to find his original face. What is his character? What is he here for? What is he supposed to do? Is he supposed to get involved in physicality and enjoyment and stuff like that? Or is he supposed to give that all up for his brother and go with the spirit? Because that is what Yitzchak does. He separates the two things. He gives him the physical, and Esau the physical, and gives only the spiritual to Yaakov. And Yaakov says that will be very problematic. You cannot live in a world where you won't have blessings and you won't have, and Esau will be rich and he will have power over him, and he is his gvir, his boss. It will be very challenging. So is it okay for me to give it back to him, and will I be able to fend for myself? All these are the challenges as the patriarch of Am Israel that he is thinking. He's thinking, God has promised me, but he sees that yes, Laban tried to push me and did this, but my angel is serving me. My angel is seeing to it that everything is okay, that I have survived and I have prospered. So taking that into his experience of the 21 years with Laban, he accepts the fact that he has to trust in Yitzchak's beracha, right? And he is willing to give back, but it is a challenge for him because he doesn't know what it will come through. And what happens afterwards is really he gets the blessing for physicality when he gives it up. That is the message of this, I think, because he is blessed with kings only after he gives back what is not his, So we have all this after even he comes back, he sets roots into Shechem, he buys property over there, he settles there. There is the episode of Dinah, and only after that he settles down, and then there is Hashem who tells him that his name is changed to from Yaakov to Israel, and that kings will come out of him, and all the blessings that will come, all the physicality, the blessings of physicality that he relinquished come back to him after he is not interested in it. That is how it is. When you don't really crave for what is, because physicality is like that. Physicality is, if you run after it, it won't give it to you. But if you relinquish it, then it will run after you. Take me. I want to be used for your spiritual purpose. And that's his faith. When he recognizes that truth about spirituality, that spirituality is about not just sitting up in the clouds. It is about bringing the clouds down, and then the physicality, this material world will open itself up for you, and that he was willing to relinquish it. That is his challenge, and that is, I think, his wrestling match over there. But the Hakamim again feel that it was Esau's. That's why sort of Esau was overpowered, and Esau was unable to do anything because his source, the power, the angel that powered him, right? He was defeated. So Esau couldn't do anything. That is how they interpret the Midrash. Any more ideas, please? Any other questions, please go ahead. Please share it with me, and that will be really nice. Judah wants to say something?
किस बद्दल आहे कब्बालिस्टिकली. ओके, जस्ट टू ऍड, मराठीमध्ये बोलतो मी. ओके, किस जो बोलतो ना, एसावने त्याच्या मानेवर पडून किस घेतली आणि दोघं रडलं. तर किस कब्बालिस्टिकली किस म्हणजे काय असतं ना, किस म्हणजे अशी गोष्ट असतं की ज्याच्यामध्ये म्हणजे अपर लेवल मध्ये, म्हणजे आता माउथ आहे ना, हा मलखूत म्हणजे स्पिरिच्युअल लेवलचा मलखूत आहे, हा वरच्या लेवलचा. तर मलखूत जेव्हा मलखूतला जॉईंट होतं, दुसऱ्या मलखूतला जॉईंट होतं, तेव्हा त्याचा किस बोलतात, इखूद बोलतात त्याला, म्हणजे युनिफिकेशन बोलतात. तर युनिफिकेशन काय आहे? युनिफिकेशन म्हणजे एखादी गोष्ट ह्या लेवलवरून त्या लेवलला जायचं, त्याला युनिफाय व्हायला लागतं. म्हणजे फिजिकल गोष्टी स्पिरिच्युअल लेवलला नेण्यासाठी आपल्याला ती फिजिकल गोष्ट आपल्याला आपल्या बॉडीमध्ये त्याचा युनिफिकेशन करायला लागतं. आपण कसं युनिफिकेशन करतो? खातो पितो, आणि त्या टायमाला नमाज करतो, बाराखा करतो. तर त्यांनी काय इफेक्ट होतं की ती जी फिजिकल गोष्ट आहे, ती गोष्ट आपण आपल्या बॉडीमध्ये युनिफाय केली, आणि ती आपण आता कशासाठी युज करतो? स्पिरिच्युअल गोष्टीसाठी युज करतो, म्हणजे एकूत केला. तसा अपर लेवलचा पण आहे. तर एसाव रिप्रेझेंट्स फिजिकॅलिटी. हा जगामधली जी फिजिकॅलिटी आहे ना, फिजिकॅलिटी म्हणजे मटेरियल नाही, फिजिकॅलिटीची जी पॉवर आहे, इट इज रिप्रेझेंटेड बाय एसाव. आणि याकोब रिप्रेझेंट स्पिरिच्युअलिटी, द स्पिरिच्युअल पॉवर. सो the episode is teaching that every time physicality has to rise up to spirituality, it has to kiss Yaakov. तर जेव्हा फिजिकॅलिटीला स्पिरिच्युअलिटी मध्ये जायचं असतं ना, तर त्याला काय लागतं? त्याला याकोबच्या मानेवर पडून याकोबला किस करायला लागतं. आणि जेव्हा तो याकोबला किस करतो, तेव्हा याकोब ती फिजिकॅलिटी स्पिरिच्युअलिटी मध्ये देऊ शकतो. यखूद होतं त्यांचं, आणि तुला ती स्पिरिच्युअलिटी देऊ शकतं. पण तो जो किस आहे ना, तो किस आहे ना, टाइम टू टाइम होऊ शकतो. फुल टाइम किस मध्ये नाही राहू शकत एसाव आणि याकोब. फुल टाइम जर किस मध्ये राहिलं ना, तर ती लोक युनिफाय झालं, आणि ती लोक युनिफाय झालं तर हा जग नाही चालणार आहे. तर त्याच्यासाठी काय आहे, फिजिकॅलिटी कधी कधी स्पिरिच्युअलिटीच्या जवळ येऊन स्पिरिच्युअलिटीला किस करतं, आणि ती स्पिरिच्युअलिटी, त्याचा जो फिजिकॅलिटीची जो स्पिरिच्युअल पॉवर आहे ना, त्या फिजिकल पॉवरला तो रिलीज देतो. म्हणजे त्याला बोलतात आपण की आपण हे केला, रेक्टिफाय केला. कुठली पण गोष्ट रेक्टिफाय करायची असेल तर रेक्टिफाय करण्यासाठी किस हा वर्ड वापरले जातात, म्हणजे युनिफिकेशन साठी. तर एसाव जेव्हा येऊन त्याला किस करते ना, तेव्हा एसावने त्याला किस केल्यावर एसावची जी एसावनी जी फिजिकॅलिटी मधून स्पिरिच्युअलिटी कमवली आहे ना, ती फिजिकॅलिटीला रिलीज होते, आणि एसाव स्पिरिच्युअलिटीला रिलीज होते. आणि मग एसाव बोलते की तू माझ्या संगती चल, पण याकोब बोलते नाही, तू जा पुढं, मी येईन स्लोली. कारण फिजिकॅलिटी मधून स्पिरिच्युअलिटी काढून स्पिरिच्युअलिटीला वर उचलासाठी आहे ना प्रोसेस आहे. त्या प्रोसेससाठी एसाव आणि ती फिजिकॅलिटी उचलून स्पिरिच्युअलिटी मध्ये नेऊन स्पिरिच्युअलिटी मधून त्याला अप्पर अजून वर नेण्यासाठी जो प्रोसेस आहे ना तो याकूबकडे आहे. तर एंड मध्ये स्पिरिच्युअलिटी आणि फिजिकॅलिटीला एक यासाठी आहे ना तो किस जो आहे ना त्या दोघांची किस जी आहे ना ती किस खूप इम्पॉर्टंट आहे. कारण जेव्हा दोघं किस करतात ना तेव्हा दोघांना समजतं की वी आर फायटिंग फॉर द सेम थिंग. आपण या जगामध्ये सेम गोष्टीसाठी हे करतोय. एक फिजिकल लेवल मध्ये करतोय, एक स्पिरिच्युअल लेवल मध्ये करतोय. होप सगळ्यांना बॅलिस्टिकल इन्साइट तुम्हाला समजलं असतं. कारण तोरामध्ये आहे ना किस ऑफ गॉड ही डाईड बाय द किस ऑफ गॉड असा कितीतरी ठिकाणी लिहिलेला आहे मोशेच्या बद्दल. तर त्याच्यामध्ये तोरा लिहिताना किस ऑफ गॉड हँड ऑफ गॉड लिहितं. कारण ट्रान्सलेट करताना किस ऑफ गॉड केला तर वेगळा मिनिंग आहे ना, म्हणजे हँड ऑफ गॉड. किस ऑफ गॉड म्हणजे काय की त्याची जी फिजिकॅलिटी आहे ना ती फिजिकॅलिटी स्पिरिच्युअलिटीला टच झाली, युनिफिकेशन झालं त्याचं. म्हणजे ह्याच्यात बोलायचं तर मोक्ष मिळाला असं आहे त्याचा अर्थ. म्हणजे रिलीज मिळालं, त्या फिजिकॅलिटीला रिलीज मिळाला. तर किस हा जो शब्द आहे ना किस, ह्या किसचा शब्द कबॅलिस्टिकली किसचा याचा काय आहे की तो युनिफिकेशनची साईन आहे, युनिफिकेशनची साईन. आणि एसाव आणि याकूबची युनिफिकेशन झालेली आहे त्या टायमाला. कधी झालेली आहे? जेव्हा आपल्याला दाखवते की तो त्या एंजल संगती ब्रेसेल करून त्या एंजलला त्यांनी हरवला ना, त्याच्यामध्ये तो आपल्याला दाखवते की एसावची आणि याकूबच्या पर्सनॅलिटी मध्ये युनिफिकेशन झालेली आहे. आणि याकूब ती गोष्ट घेऊन वर टाकू शकतो. Joshua, yours.
Shavua Tov Mevorach.
Thank
You
you.
also have a nice weekend ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.